The other.
Well, you can smile now and then. Someday I hope that you as speakers are invited somewhere to give a nice little talk on these higher truths. You're invited to give your first professional talk out somewhere. A little ladies' club here in town or somewhere. And you're already shaking, aren't you? Just the very thought of it. Just wait till you get there. You'll walk into the room. I'm giving you how it could go and will go in one way or another. You'll walk into the room, you know, let's say it's in a home, kind of informal. That makes a, see, you latch on to that. Oh, that makes it better. I feel more comfortable in a home, and already you're making an error, by the way. So you walk into the home, and there's, say, 40 ladies of the garden club sitting there. And you walk in, and your face searches their face, and already you're scared. Because you see that hard-faced woman, that giddy-faced woman, that bored woman. And you know that you being a woman, know that women can be pretty bad. They can be pretty cold. They can be pretty mean. Right, ladies?
Right.
Huh? Catty, I think is the word. And worse. And so, now, I'm telling you about something good that's good. This is all good for you, you understand? This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. Okay, the tension builds 10 minutes away from the top, 9 minutes, 8 minutes. You look at the clock nervously. Boy, I'm about to go on, and I'm getting more scared by the minute. So you finally get to it, and the chairman, the chair lady, gives a long, boring introduction and talks about the minutes of the last meeting, and nobody cares and all that. No, you want to get it over with, and she won't let you even start. Finally, you get up. Your big moment, your first professional appearance. Next year, Broadway, but tonight, Boulder City. And so you start talking. Cold, cold hearts show cold, cold faces. And you see disapproval, and you see boredom, and you see criticism. This is a good thing to happen to you, a wonderful thing to happen. Because you will see, maybe, really, emotionally, for the first time, that you are a little slave of everyone. And you have forgot what you were told and have been told in this class 50 times. You are in charge of everyone. Not only giving that talk, but in the home, down at the business. Consciously in charge, not domineering. And it becomes very easy. It becomes very easy when you really know what you're talking about. Now, you don't know much of what you're talking about on your first professional talk, but you've had the courage to do what we're going to discuss a little bit tonight, which is this. Almost every human being is unconsciously passive. Almost every human being on earth is unconsciously passive, inactive, retreating. All that has to go as far as we're concerned, because we want to give long and hard thought to what it means to be consciously aggressive, consciously active, which means to sooner or later, now you listen, sooner or later, if you want to grow inwardly, if you want to increase the light, you're going to have to do things such as accept the opportunity to give a talk before all those cold men or cold women, whichever the case may be, so that you're put in a dreadfully uncomfortable position. This is consciously putting yourself aggressively putting yourself in a position in which your artificial personality does not want to be, and you say to it, I don't care what you want, I know what I want out no matter how bad it hurts. No matter how it pains me to stand up there and go through that new kind of hell, I want out more than I want to play it safe. Any of us can sit back in the corner of the room and criticize other speakers, live in daydreams that we know a lot more than they do, criticize the way he gives the talk, think that we could do much better if only someone would give us an opportunity. Have you ever done that, by the way? Have you ever criticized a speaker and thought that maybe you could do better? Or he should have, maybe some of it was justified. Maybe he did ramble on mechanically for 2 hours or whatever. Point being this: you be very inventive, very resourceful in finding ways, small ways, in which you could begin to be actively, consciously aggressive in doing things that you don't want to do, sensible things, not stupid things, which your old nature refuses to do and tells you not to do, but which you sense is indeed a school for you. And you have to go through that school so that you go on to the next one, the next lesson. You can't skip grades. You've been told that before. Start at the kindergarten if necessary, and find very small ways in which you can deliberately put yourself in an uncomfortable position because the arrow is pointed back to you and you can simply see what is happening to you. And you bear it. You endure it. What else do? You bear it and endure it. What do you care? And so you go out of that room after giving that talk shaky, feeling that you were foolish, that you didn't go over it all, that they were critical. And you ask, why on earth do I do such dumb things as that? Why don't I just stay home and enjoy myself? Why am I torturing myself like this? If you really want out, you will go back the next night and do the same thing all over again, only this time you'll try to make it worse in some way. Maybe you look at that man with the mean face down at the front row, or that extremely critical woman, and be very conscious that she's being a slave to herself, is getting a great deal of unconscious pleasure out of sitting there scowling at you, the speaker, hoping in her neurosis and sickness that she can influence you. And she's very cunning, by the way. She's watching you watch her. She's seeing your eyes apprehensively meet her eyes. And because she's a devil, she's getting pleasure out of making you nervous. Let her try all she wants. If she makes you nervous, she makes you nervous. But you now know what is going on. And you're growing. You're being brave. You're being courageous. You're daring. You don't want to suffer by living in daydreams of giving a talk or whatever, but you actually do it. You go through the hell of it in order to come out on the other side. I'll give you a personal example of this that I gave to Sally. This last week, on Tuesday night, I believe it was, 6 of us had dinner together in a restaurant in Pasadena. And the 6 of us were sitting around talking before the dinner was served, back and forth, just light, casual conversation. And Sally was sitting next to me on the right, and one of the men across from her at the table said that he was from Ireland. And were you from Ireland too? I think I recognize your accent. Sally corrected him. He asked her another question. Sally answered with one word. He asked her a third question. She answered with one word, like, I used to live near Edinburgh. Glasgow. Used to live near Glasgow. And when it was all over, I was talking with Sally, and I sensed that she was had not used that opportunity quite right. She had not used it according to these principles we've discussed up until now. So I gave her a project which she was very much interested in, because the arrow was pointed back to her enough so that she could feel that she was not handling it properly. She was handling it nervously. So I told her what she was doing wrong, which was simply this. It's sort of like I illustrate it by illustrating how you talk with a small child. You know, when you talk with a small child, you ask them their name. They'll say, Billy. Where do you live, Billy? In that house. How old are you, Billy? 8. In other words, a child can't continue a conversation. He answers the question and then just drops it. His mind can't go on to enter into the spirit of a back and forth conversation. So this is what Sally was doing. She was, in her timidity, was just answering with one word. So I told her, and she's going to do this, I told her from now on, you will do the difficult thing. Now look, when you're sitting around the dinner table, you're not sitting around expected to discuss the profound secrets of the ages necessarily. You might discuss the wonton soup that's coming up next in the Chinese restaurant or whatever. That's fine, discuss it if you want. So I told her, from now on, when you're in a situation like that, don't simply, in your tension, sit back and answer with one word. Instead, you will deliberately do something that's difficult, that's uncomfortable. When the man asks you where you're from, instead of just saying Scotland, you will force yourself to continue with it, to go back and forth on it by volunteering something in addition. We know this is small talk. We know this. That isn't the point. The point is you're breaking the habit of being passive. He asks the question, and you answer with one word, now I'm through with it. All I have to do is sit here and respond to his question. That's the easy way. We don't want the easy way because it's too miserable. So you will deliberately search your memory and think of something. You will say, well, Glasgow, as you know, is 30 miles from the coast. It's an industrial city. Have you ever been to Glasgow? I've visited there as a girl many times. Then it goes back and forth. He will ask questions, but you are not to take the easy way out, but just simply answer with one word. Now that's one example that she's going to use. Where can you find, this is up to you now, can you find a way, instead of sitting back and playing it safe, deliberately go up and do something that's very difficult for you to do, something that you don't want to do, something that your old timid nature insists that you shouldn't do. And if you're doing it rightly, if you've got the right place to do it, you will do it with fear and trembling. But watching that you're doing it, see, look, if I sit back in the corner, I can't experience the challenge, can I? How can I experience the challenge of the dragon out there, whatever it might be, answering someone consciously, for example? How can I experience and know I'm experiencing the battle with the dragon if I'm not battling with it at all? I have to deliberately get out there with my lance and with him smoking his fire and all that. Get out there and battle with him. Now I can become quite conscious that it is a battle, and I've always been in a battle, but I didn't know it until I got out there and said, I'm going to make it worse for myself. I was in a battle when I was back in the corner, afraid of the dragon. But I didn't know that, because then I could live in daydreams and say I'm not afraid of the dragon, because my eyes were closed. But I open them a little bit and get out there. Now indeed, I know how scared I am. And that's what we've got to see. If you get out there and get hurt by a particular dragon, whatever it may be, for example, you're in a conversation with someone, and all of a sudden it switches to the opposite. You suddenly find him just giving one word answer to your question. Make it all the harder on yourself by increasing the pace of your questions so that it's quite hard for you, very difficult for you. See? That's one example. Find your own. When you do this, you will find that other people, while at the instant of the dragon breathing on you, you get scared, but you immediately, because you've been working on yourself, remember yourself remember yourself, and you immediately, listen to this, you immediately come to an internal stop so that nothing happens. Nothing happens inside of you, therefore, as far as you are concerned, there's no cold, hostile faces in that audience that you're talking to at all. It exists for them, but not for you, because you're not absorbing it. You're not afraid of it, therefore it doesn't touch you. You have brought yourself to a complete stop. And you can just have the time of your life, because you're not depending on them for approval. You're not depending on them to agree with you. You're not depending on them to be your friend. What do you care whether they're your friends or not? You're your own best friend in a very real, solid, and eternal way. You've got it made. You've got it made. What shall you fear? I think that's a half a quotation from somewhere. What shall I fear? All right. Being very, very, very watchful as to where you're passive, where you play it safe, where you hang back, and let the other person do the work. You will start doing some of the work yourself, so that you deliberately put yourself in a position where you don't want to be. That is where you learn. You never, never, never learn in a comfortable situation. You only learn from discomfort, because it is unfamiliar. And you learn from the unfamiliar, not from the known. Your prayer should be, every morning your prayer should be, how can I make things rougher on myself today by deliberately doing what my old cowardly nature doesn't want me to do? How can I properly defy it? How can I refuse to go along with its whisper that you'll be in danger if you go out there? Do you know how dragons of any kind are conquered completely? By doing just what I said, going right out and doing battle with them, until you see that the dragon is first of all in you, not in that audience out there, not in another person. The dragon is in you, and you've come right out with the battle, and you've slain the dragon. Then is there any dragon to be afraid of? You can come to a stop now if you like. Complete stop internally. What do you care what happens next? You want something to happen next? There is no next in consciousness. There's a next only in time, only in anxiety. God never knows a next. Think about this. You cannot keep a truth. You cannot keep a truth for your own unless you have earned it for your own. You cannot keep a lesson such as the lesson we just discussed. You can't keep that lesson with you as a power, so to speak, unless you have acquired it for yourself by your own efforts. I'll give you a very interesting parallel to that in the daily world. If you go get a man, without meaning the term to be insulting, if you get a bum down off of Skid Row, a man who's been defeated by himself and by life, and he has 5 cents in his pocket, if that much, and if you give him $10,000, how long will it take? A month or 60 days before he has only 5 cents left? Any money you give to a person who has not earned for himself, he will not know how to handle it, what to do with it, and he will lose it. This is his level, you see. Anything you have earned for yourself, you know what to do with it. You know how to protect it, how to handle it, how to invest it even. Any truth that you have earned for yourself by practicing perhaps the lesson we had this morning, any truth that you have rightfully earned is yours for eternity, not just for this life. It is yours for all of eternity because you have earned the right to have it for yourself, which is not the individual self, of course, for your cosmic self, the universal self. It becomes yours to keep. No one, no thieves and robbers can break in and steal it from you. Thieves can only steal falsehood in you disguised as truth. Thieves cannot steal truth because they're not on the level. It'd be like a thief on the ground trying to rob the wealth of a passenger in a 50-story building. He can't reach that high. It's quite safe up there. It's on another level. And when you have a truth that is your own, you do indeed know that it's yours forever. Rather, I should say, you feel, you sense in a higher sensing that it's yours forever, that nobody can ever take it away from you. If you stand up in front of an audience for the first time and work consciously to not be their slave, then you stand up the next day, the next day, the next day. The time will come when you know simply and clearly and without thinking about it that you, now being in charge of yourself, are in charge of that audience and of every other human being you'll ever meet. You know that without thinking about it. You know that you can't be touched by anyone or anything. It has become you. The truth has become you. Not you and the truth, but a blending, a fusion, just one thing there. And there's no thought involved in it at all. And no false pride over it or anything. God is not proud of himself. He doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to think about his nature. He is his nature. Anything you are on a higher plane, you don't have to think about. You only have to think about your negativities, which you call positive things, in an effort to try to convince yourself that the negative is a positive, which will never work. There's no such convincing of yourself of that. There's only a wearing yourself out, trying to convince yourself. I'll give you a personal experience, then we'll have a break. Leland and I were at a meeting last night in a Southern California city. And during the talk, we discussed all these things about consciousness, about it being aware, about waking up. And then after the talk was over, we all went upstairs where they had refreshments and also an informal get-together in which the meeting was continued with questions and answers. And a number of people came over to me and talked, said little things, some gave little speeches to me. But one woman in particular was talking with me, and she was telling me all about spiritual truths, about the books she'd read, about how interested she was in these things. And as I once told you, if you'll notice that when I'm talking with someone, I never talk, of course. I'm always listening. And this was the case in this case. I was listening. But the thought occurred to me, what a wonderful example this lady is of a human being who can never be told that she's asleep. This lady was a nice, pleasant lady on the everyday level. We had coffee in front of us and cakes, and she was just talking to me on and on and on. This was 5 minutes after she had ceased to hear an hour's talk, over an hour's talk, I believe it was, about being an awake human being instead of a mechanical, asleep human being. So she didn't hear anything downstairs. And I also knew, of course, which you understand, there's no point whatever, right in the middle of her conversation, snapping my hand in her face and saying, "Stop, wake up," or taking her shoulder, "Wake up, will you please? Wake up, you're sound asleep and don't know it." You're going on and on and on in your sleep. So one by one, the ladies and the men came over and blabbed to me, some of them very forcefully, some of them telling me all about how they would have handled this talk or something like that. I don't remember the detail. But some of them forcefully, authoritatively telling me things which they knew. So you sit back and look and say, at last I know what it means to be asleep. You can hear an hour's talk, told that you're all mixed up, that you can't shut your mouth for 2 minutes, you have to blab eternally, and you come right up out of that auditorium and blab, blab, blab. All right, all right. What's going to happen during the break, which we're going to take in a minute? Are you going to be sound asleep and blab to the other person mechanically, forgetting what you've heard right now with a break just a minute perhaps away? Are you going to go right back to sleep when you stand up and go out to the coffee? Or are you going to let your mechanical mind take you over? Or are you going to stay wide awake during the 10 minutes that we're going to have now? You make a special effort now to stay awake for the next 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and have open discussion. All right, take a break, please. Pardon?
Would you like to?
During the break, Dauphine informed me that she wants to end up on Broadway. So she's going to do her apprentice with 5 minutes in Boulder City.
Already?
You're on.
Oh, and I didn't prepare for it.
And the meaner you look, the more of a friend you are to Dauphine. Remember that.
Pretty good friend. It occurred to me yesterday, no, this morning.
Loud and clear.
It occurred to me this morning that we fight from the minute we get up till the minute we lay ourselves tired down to sleep. In a very odd way. We don't let the day come and bring what it wants to bring because it will anyhow. But we wake up and we start building barricades the way we want it to happen. And we waste the whole day. Because incidents will happen. For instance, my doorbell rang last night and I thought I was wide awake before that. But just the shock of the ringing of the doorbell, I could watch as I walked to the door, that anger, who would ring my doorbell at such and such time. And I could see that I was completely out of control and completely did not know how to meet that moment because I was not awake and because we cannot plan shocks or happenings of a day. It will come unexpected every time. Somebody approaches in a certain way, it comes unexpected, and how we react is what we try to change, to be aware of ourselves and of what the other person says, and not be taken over by it. You think I'll make it to Broadway?
Keep practicing.
No meanies out there tonight. I had a friend completely push the door in this morning on me and take over my time, and I had a beautiful opportunity to be bored, and as I was sitting there listening to my friend boring me to death, I was fighting my friend, and I watched for the first time. I was wondering, what am I fighting? Why am I not sitting here being grateful, as Vernon pointed out for us, to have somebody telling us their boring life story. And also in this friend, I could see that even pleasure and painful events were all painful in her manner of speech. There was nothing she was telling me of her life what seemed to be pleasurable, although many things on a social level be considered quite pleasurable to possessions. But they were all coming out of her in great agony and pain and with a complete exhaustion of all energies. I think I give up now.
Now, take a few questions. Give her some hard questions.
How should you be grateful to this lady for boring you?
Well, I tried to ask it to myself as I was sitting there, because I could see that sometimes I wanted her to be quiet so I could lecture her. And when I saw my impatience, and I really don't quite know how I'm going to be grateful, but one of these days I'll find out. It's the best we can do.
Who was at the door last night? Who knocked at your door?
Somebody who wanted something, like a neighbor borrowing something.
When you say, Dolphine, I have a friend, do you really have a friend?
No, I don't. Not even myself. But I mean, considered as a matter of speech, we say it's our friend. It's my friend, you know.
Okay. What would you say to then, John? What would you say to someone who says, I like coming to this class and all that, but I'm afraid that truth is trying to take something of value away from me. I really fear that.
What would I reply to this?
What would you reply? Yes.
To take some serious thinking. I cannot.
Pardon?
I cannot answer this right offhand.
Okay.
I don't have an answer.
Go on to Chuck's.
I see, the first time I heard you, I was a little bored. Now I see, you lay out something very, I see a lot of growth. Is it in you or me?
One more.
Right?
Do you remember your immediate feelings or your thoughts when you heard the knock or the doorbell ring?
My feeling is I was, if the word rightly used, I was indignant. No, I felt somebody was greatly imposing upon me. Me, the queenie, laying in bed, ringing the door, now I have to get up and answer it. And what could anybody possibly want from me when I am tired, you know, so to speak. I do remember, because I have very often felt imposed upon over the most insignificant things from others, yet in the same instant often it shows me that I do the same things and expect a pleasant face from the other person, and yet I do the same things in reverse.
Take Zena's and then that's it.
How do you handle your hostility when someone's telling you their boring life story? What do you do?
I try to use what I learn out here to actually listen and see why I fight it. If I can see, if I fight something, then I'm not in union with myself, and so therefore I might better listen and pay attention, so that I am really. Wait. To see that this negative part of me will not take me over, and I will not sit there burning up energy over thinking, I wish she would leave, I wish she'd get the hint, but simply sit there and listen to it and see that I am not in conflict with her or with myself. So no matter if she would talk, or if music were in the background, or if a storm would be outside, it wouldn't make any difference. None of those three would matter to me in one way or another. They just would be there. That's the best I can do, sir.
All right, fine, thank you. What would you like to discuss? Yes, Jean.
You talked about having a conversation with people. I was in Alicia's store, and a police officer came in for candy, and we struck up a conversation over the candy, and I got nervous, and there was a yoga book there, and that subject came up. Then he wanted to know what I wore if I did yoga, what I wore, and it felt very wrong. And I got too nervous, so I changed the subject to my product, an automotive product that I thought might be good on the police car, because I felt comfortable with that. It directed it in another direction. Then he wanted to know if we could go out, and I didn't like him. He reminded me, number one, of a person who had me fired one time. He felt so wrong. I just didn't feel right. But I wasn't nasty to him because, number one, he's in a friend's store, and I'm polite and so forth. And I did give him my card for the automotive product. And then he did call later, and I wasn't nasty. I said, gee, I've been away from my job because of my car, and I really have a lot of work to do, perhaps some other time. Just very general, nothing specific. Then he told someone that he will never enter Alicia's store again because he was solicited.
Will you run that by again? What?
That's right. In other words, now he's telling people that he was really bothered. And I said to Alicia, who was doing the soliciting, you see, this man he's very sick, because again on the phone he brought up, what do I wear when I do my exercises?
All right.
It was very sick.
All right, how does this incident connect with our purpose in this class?
Well, I'm wondering what I did wrong. I knew I was nervous. I saw that, and I thought it was really strange that I was so nervous talking to him and trying to keep everything on a level. So what did I handle wrong that brought this hostility out, or is that just simply his problem?
It's his problem, but it's yours. What happened? Do you ladies enjoy, to one degree or another, leading men on? Does that give you an ego thrill to lead men on up to a certain point? Even though you know you're not serious toward them, do you get a certain pleasure in playing little games with men?
Yes,
Huh?
yes.
Tell
We
us
have
about it.
representations all our lives. We have often, and I have seen it now in young people I work with, and in the past I have done it. A young man may be very interested in me. I find them completely boring, and I used to make a date and then deliberately not know in advance that I would not come there. And I think this is a very evil thing now. I begin to see that it's an evil play of emotions of one another.
Mm-hmm. You do, yes, go ahead, Jean.
Last week, you said, yes, we are psychically not male or female, first of all.
Okay.
And I prefer to approach a person as a person, not as a male or a female, but like what's there. And then it goes into those areas.
Look, no one contacts you unless you ask for it in one way or another. You ask for that phone call. Don't worry. If you want to brush a man off, you can do it in 2 seconds. Right? And you've done it, haven't you? All you lovely, attractive ladies.
But how you know if he's sick or not until you talk to him, you know. Plus maybe it's a potential customer.
I wonder if we could raise the level of our discussion a little bit now.
You mentioned earlier that when you have a truth, you know it or you sense it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go into this sensing a little bit more?
The kingdom of heaven is within. The kingdom of heaven, which is within, is not me. It has nothing to do with my human personality. It has nothing to do with the intellectual level at all, which is memory, imagination, identification, etc. It has to do with something which I don't have to think about because I am it. You see? And the best way to answer your question, really, Dorothy, is to get to the point where you simply know something without thinking about it, and then you also know that it's permanently yours. Now, the problem is, when I explain this to you, you immediately compare it with thinking. You say, is this the same as knowing something on the intellect? You know that you own an automobile. You own that. See, there is you and there is the automobile which you own. Therefore, you think about that. But in consciousness, in cosmic possession, you might say, there's no such thing as an owner and the owned. That would be division, wouldn't it? That would be thinking about it. There's something that is there without thought. All thought is divisive. Consciousness is not divisive. It's whole. It's one. It doesn't have to think about itself. It is that. I am that I am. Period. You'll see when you get this what we're talking about. I have to explain it on the level of division, by the way, don't I? You'll see. Then there's no doubt whatever. Thought doubts, doesn't it? Because it has an opposite. Christ died for my sins, therefore I'm saved. You're going to doubt it the next minute. But because you don't know these things we're learning here, you will have to keep reaffirming it over and over and over in order to keep doubt out, which can't be done, by the way. Lies can never be, falsehood can never be blocked out entirely. So this is why Christians, for example, have to always cling together, sing together, pray together. Just as a preliminary remark, if you're going to follow the leader all your life, You won't make it out. If you're going to play follow the leader all your life, you won't make it out. Sooner or later, you're going to have to understand what it means to abandon the false leadership of your false personality, abandon that, have the courage to let it go, so that you've lost all ideas, all supports, all comforts of following what you have always followed, which has led you into the ditch, which has led all of us into the ditch. You'll have to have the courage to have no idea whatever of what to follow, of where to go, of how to find the way out. No idea whatever. And with a complete abandonment of all hope, of all concepts which say this is the way out, with the ending of that, you are out by seeing you were in the trap simply because you had ideas about the way out. The ideas themselves were the prison cells that kept us in. Because the ideas gave me the idea that I am in prison. You am not in prison. There is no one there to be in prison. When you see that, the prison shatters because you shatter. The prison comes to an end because you come to an end. And there it's been right in front of us for all these years, but we didn't want to see it because we wanted to hang on to ourselves. For example, hang on to ourselves with the identity that here I am trapped. I am trapped by this prison. God help me. God show me the way out. As long as I told you before, as long as you say, God show me the way out, you'll never get out. Because you want to remain you, the penitent sinner, the penitent or unpenitent sinner who wants to get out. There's no one there to get out. When you see this, you're out, but it isn't you. It's the collapse of the idea that there's someone there to get out. Now shut it off. Write down a sentence, please. The way out consists of endlessly trembling and listening. The way out consists of endlessly trembling and listening. The way out consists of endlessly trembling and listening. Take the word trembling, first of all. How many of you tremble? I'm not talking about physically if you cross a busy street, but mentally tremble, emotionally tremble. How many of you are scared? How's that? How many of you are scared? You're all scared, every one of you. So this is our state, to tremble all the time, because we are alienated, we're separated from who we really are. We're wandering out in the wilderness, thinking that the wilderness is the only place we can be, and all that. Listening, if I have to listen while trembling, that's the only thing I can do, isn't it? If I'm trembling and have to listen, then that's the only thing I can do, if I really want the way out. Start at the beginning. You're sitting here in this class. You're being told certain fundamental facts, which are the facts that begin to set us free. The greater part of you trembles in a way which you cannot possibly imagine yet. You haven't begun to break down yet. You're still too happy. You're still too cheerful. You're still too confident. You still have it made. life isn't so bad, we all have our problems, but it's not too bad. Why do you even say that to yourself? You're trying to convince yourself. So you're going to have to, and all people who want the way out, are going to have to start shaking much, much more than you presently do, but be aware of it. In other words, get the idea out of the way that you even halfway have it made. What I'm really saying is, in order to get out, we have to see what a liar we really are about everything. Even our faces lie, don't they? Have you lied with your face this morning? Of course you have. To yourself or to other people or both altogether. All right. We're sitting here in this room hearing certain fundamental facts which can begin to guide us out. You hear something, and internally and quite unconsciously, you begin to tremble. What trembles? Let's find out what trembles. What trembles is the devil within. What trembles are the dark parts of us that don't want to listen to what is being said, because the devil doesn't want to be destroyed at all. He wants to remain in his place of commanding and wrecking our lives. So if you can be awake enough to begin to recognize what is happening to you in this class when you hear a series of truths, you can begin to see what is going on inside of you. That is, you are indeed taken over by dark forces that want to keep you its slave, their slave. And when you do this, you can also begin to see that you can't, of your own self, fight this trembling, fight this devil. You can't do it of yourself. You have no strength. And so you simply sit there and tremble and dare the devil to do his worst with you, which will make him even more scared. But it's the proper thing to do, because now you are resisting not evil. So you shut it off. I'm coming in. Turn it on. So you're sitting here trembling at a truth that you have heard. And instead of resisting it with the thought, I'd better cover this trembling up, I'd better not let anybody see how shaken I am, you just sit there and tremble, but you continue to listen. See? This is very difficult to explain and very difficult for you to absorb. It's hard for both of us, but we're trying. So when we sit here and tremble at the truth, without trying to do anything about it, without saying, I should fight this trembling, I should be brave, when you don't say, I should be brave, what happens? The trembling continues, but you can now stand outside of it because you're not interfering with it. You can see what is happening, which means you recognize the trembling, the devil, and become conscious of it, which means you are no longer it for that second, which means that something higher than the trembling is standing outside and seeing it, which means that something higher than the trembling is interrupting it, which means that something higher than you has power, beginning to have power over it. This is the divine interruption, the throwing of the log in front of the rushing truck. And so for a split second, I have not interfered with what is happening inside of me, and I can begin to understand what is happening inside of me. I no longer think that I, in my own power, can do anything about my fear of hearing the truth. That is, it is not really my fear, and I begin to see this, but something that is foreign, that has had me its slave all its life, which I now begin to see as something that is really separate from me. I thought that I was this trembling, and in one sense I was. I also thought that I could do something about it. You know what you can do about your fear of the truth? Just sit there and fear it. Sit there and fear it without counter-attacking, without bringing into it the fact, well, that man says certain things, but my religion says another thing. Do you know why you say my religion? Especially new people, not so much you. Do you know why new people who have a lot of religious or philosophical ideas say that? Their fear of the destruction of their false personality, which includes religious dogma, at the hands of truth itself. Which means, as long as you put an idea in there of fighting your trembling, you'll never get out. We're here to be destroyed, are we not? And as long as you bring in a second idea that I shouldn't tremble, after all, I have the power of the church in back of me, or the power of all these hundreds of books I've read in back of me. I have the power of that in back of me. Therefore, what that man is saying, or what someone else says in this room, should not shake me. You're lying. Why don't you sit here and be shaken? Why don't you begin to fall apart right in this room? This is your salvation. This is your hope. Without that, we remain what? We remain frozen, rigid, refusing to listen while pretending to. And then going out in sarcasm and in great sorrow. When you're sarcastic, by the way, you are in great sorrow, maybe unknown to yourself. Because a certain part of you knows that you have made the decision to reject what could have set you free. Read the sentence aloud, Joan, please.
The way out consists of endlessly trembling and listening.
Now, isn't that the simplified, let me start over. Isn't that a simple way to find the way out? You sit here and certain things bother you that you hear, and you become increasingly aware that you are being bothered. When you first come here, you don't know how much is wrong with you. You don't know how much you're going to have to take the digging inside of you and the cleaning out of it, because we're living in imagination that's not too bad after all, that we're in fair shape at least. Yeah, things are not too bad. So as you come here, one of my tasks is to make you tremble more and more and more, and your task is to be aware that you're far more scared and resistant to truth than you thought you were. This is the recognition of the badness of our state. So when you see the trembling, the task is very simple. You sit here and listen and tremble. And you listen and tremble. And you listen and tremble endlessly. This process alone will begin to change your internal state. You're beginning to do something quite different with your fear than you ever did before. All right. Notice now. You notice, and notice in the future, maybe 15 minutes from now, during the break or whatever, you notice one thing. Even out there talking with someone, you have the coffee in your hand, you're talking about any subject at all, and you're also watching the other person. You watch a certain very small bit of apprehension in you in talking with this person. Maybe you said something and it didn't come out quite the way you wanted it to come out, or they said something that upsets you a little bit. You watch and see that your first reaction is panic in order to correct the situation in some way, in order to feel better. See, you're disturbed. That person said something. Maybe they said a fact. Maybe they said that, I noticed that your eyes wander all during the talk. You don't pay attention at all, do you? See, now that hit you in the wrong place. In the first place, you got found out because you keep your eyes on the speaker while they do. Some people look up. But you got found out. All right. Instead of leaping in to protect yourself in order to feel good, don't do anything about it at all, but stand there and tremble to see that person found you out, which is a new kind of honesty, by the way, isn't it? And out of that will come a little lesson For example, you will say to you're trembling, and you go through it. You don't protect it. You don't refuse the lesson. You don't cover up the gold in the lesson by explaining and saying, well, a little bit, yeah, but most of the time I listen. See, you're trying to recover, aren't you? You're trying to protect yourself. You might become shockingly aware that more than 50% of the time right here in this class, your attention is wandering. And by the way, the wandering of attention is also a self-protective device. It gets a little too much for you, and so you go off into the meadows and the beautiful garden or whatever to give you a little relief from the force of what's happening here. But instead of refusing the lesson, you stand there and tremble, consciously see in full the little minor shock that you had when someone said that you don't listen. The minute you accept your trembling, you get the gold from the lesson. And you see maybe for the first time ever that indeed your mind does wander, and along with that you can now see that you are defeating yourself every time your mind wanders, because endless gold is going on, is being given out in this class, and so you say, how foolish could I have been to have missed all this gold all this time? Well, I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to make an attempt. I'm going to make an effort to listen more and more and more all the time. See what you've gained by that simple little self-honesty, by just standing there and trembling instead of rushing in with a defense, with an explanation. You just stand there and took the minor insult or criticism, whatever you want to call it. All day long, 24 hours of the day, life in the form of other people and of experiences and in the form of our own mind is trying to get these lessons through to us. But we don't want to listen. We don't want to endure the fear, endure the trembling fully. Instead, in some way or other, we want to run away. Now you find out where you run away right here in this class. Or, let's get it a little broader, right out there. How many of you, were any of you insulted this week? Criticized? Anyone criticized this week? Not necessarily with words. Any of you were frowned at this week by anyone? Scolded by anyone? All right. Think of this. All right, let's make it the last year so you're all included. You think back and think of what your reaction was, and immediately you will find that instead of enduring the shaking, you tried to bring in something which would relieve the pain of you being scolded. And that was the mistake, wasn't it? We wanted to keep our picture in place of being what? Depends on what you were scolded about. Well, you were inefficient in doing that particular bit of work down at the office. You took an hour to do what you could have done in 15 minutes had you handled it properly. All right? Why on earth? Look, aren't we stupid? Why do we defend a mistake on any level at all, even on the level of everyday living? Why not take the advice in order to be more efficient so that we could have more time, so that we could create more, which is our natural state, by the way, to create with maximum efficiency on the everyday level, as much as a sick society will let you, and they won't let you go too far. But that has no bearing on our efficiency. You can be 100% efficient, naturally 100% efficient, and that's all you need. Even if you send your full efficiency out into the world and only 1% of it is accepted. Examples of this, Joan and I have all the time cases where we write to someone trying to conduct our business efficiently, and we can't get an answer to a very urgent letter. We simply can't get an answer, or some other thing comes up where we can't proceed. That's their concern, not ours, because Joan and I are using this business to wake up, not to get rich. And we're certainly not getting rich. See the main point. When we are shocked, let me go ahead of myself. People who do not come back here do not come back because they cannot even begin to do what we've talked about. The trembling is so fierce, becomes so frightened at the idea of leaving false personality, that out of this fear, the fear will then, when they go out of the room and drive on home, the fear then goes into 50 different explanations depending on their conditioning. They say it was boring, or they've heard it before, or it has no practical value to their problem with their husband. Endlessly, you understand? Try to find out where you can use the little lesson we've had today out in your daily life. To stand there, sit there, and tremble when a challenge comes up from the outside. Just stand there so you can see yourself tremble, instead of bringing a defense or an offense in of any kind. That is a proper response to the challenges of the world. Now, if you don't have a challenge from the exterior world, find one from here, from your own self. How about self-accusation? Write down a sentence so we don't miss the importance of this. Self-accusation is pure vanity. Self-accusation is pure vanity. You see why this is so, do you not? When I accuse myself of anything, I am saying I may be dumb, but at least I exist as a dummy, which is a lie. You don't exist as anything. When you accuse yourself of anything, instead of going along with the false pleasure of the self-accusation, instead of going along and enjoying, quote marks around enjoying the pain of the self-accusation, stand outside and see what you are doing against yourself by accusing yourself. And what you're doing is saying, I exist. It's unfortunate that I exist as a dumbhead. I would rather exist as a brilliant intellect and get applause from society and get medals and get honors and all that. Unfortunately, I exist as a failure, but thank heaven I exist as someone, and you're in the trap. Self-accusation and self-praise being exactly the same thing, exactly the same error of keeping a false sense of self in place. We'll take a break at this time. Before we have open discussion, and Jan, then you can ask your question all over again. Let me ask you a question. How thoroughly do you understand? Yeah, thank you. How thoroughly do you understand that when a sleeping person, first of all, do you know you're asleep?
Yes.
Do you know you don't know anything at all? Do you know that it's much worse than you imagine it is? Now we got that settled? When a sleeping person asks a question about the way out, or about practically anything except on the practical level, such as carpentry or something like that, when a sleeping person asks a question or makes a comment, it makes no sense whatever. When we're asleep, when we're lost, when we haven't found truth, reality, God, when we haven't found it, we're on the level of mechanicalness, of nonsense, of blabbermouthery. It doesn't make any sense at all. However, being asleep, we don't know we're asleep. We don't know that our questions right in this room have no reality, no sense to them at all. Therefore, there is really, really no answer to them. Now you watch for the rest of this meeting the kind of questions and comments that are made in regard to what I just said. Try to see that the question is really all wrong. The question is wrong. Not that it's wrong to ask it, because we have to work at the level we're at. What I'm trying to say is this. Try to see that the answer has to be on a much higher level than the question. Heaven help this class if I ever answer questions on the level in which they are given. See, this is why in one way your question is really ignored. A small child asks you how he can fly by flapping his arms, and you get out there and illustrate, well, son, you do it like this. So with that brief introduction, let's have questions. Jan, go ahead. Feel free to ask anything you like.
Okay, go back to the same question I started to ask you about the humility. Is this supposed to be a lesson in humility where you, as the Bible teaches humility? And I know you're obviously not supposed to bow and scrape to people, but it seems kind of stupid to just stand there, too. Especially if the other person is incorrect in their observations or something, you really don't care what they think about you.
You don't care? Do you really care what other people think about you?
Some people I do and some people I don't.
You're completely free of some people, of what they think about you?
Well, if they live a lifestyle that that I could care less about living or something like that, I don't care what they think about me.
Ask a clear, short, specific question, if you like.
I can't give you a particular example, that has happened to me that I worry about at this time.
Okay, fine. All right, open discussion, questions, anything you like. What would you like to talk about? You might want to connect it with what we talked about during the first half. Juanita, what did we talk about during the first half of the meeting?
Letting yourself be exposed and not reacting to it.
Chuck, what did we talk about?
About the trembling, observe your trembling, and this way you can, it'll give you gold by not covering it up, and you get more free.
Jackie, what did we talk about?
Trembling and listening.
Fred?
Be insulted and have no defense.
See, you're all waiting to be called on, aren't you? You're watching it. Juan, what did we talk about?
Not to try to change anything of what you see in yourself. Try to bring something else to change it.
Dorothy?
To tremble and not interfere with the trembling.
Yes, that's good. All the answers are right, of course. Don't interfere with the trembling. Don't try to do something with it. If you do something with it, you'll just bring in another form of trembling, like self-defense. Have you ever noticed how you're trembling when you defend your position, your ideas? When people knock on your door and give you a little piece of paper and talk religion to you, if you were to say something back contrary to it, watch immediately how the different kinds of defenses would come up. They might pick up a Bible and quote from it or whatever. Just watch how defense and a sleeping state always go together. Wouldn't it be nice to have no defenses at all because there's no one there needing to be defended? Wouldn't that be a beautiful way to live? Or is it a scary thought to you that there'd be nobody there? It is just now a scary thought to you. Yes, Jan.
It seems to me like if someone persecutes you or whatever, something is opened up that makes you fear or tremble. And then if you don't do anything about it, it seems to me like what that's leaving you in is a state of worrying about what you know, what's wrong with you. And if you're not supposed to do anything about it, you just sit there and stew and worry about it. Now, can you clarify what you are supposed to do? There's got to be some kind of positive action.
You're supposed to bring something into the situation which is not a part of your conditioning, your usual self-defense or self-offensive. You know the trouble with this class? You do not see yourself as you are. And I can tell by the questions you ask, you haven't the foggiest notion of what's going on inside of you. You're basing it on the assumption that you understand yourself, and you don't. The purpose in standing and watching yourself tremble is to try to bring something else in besides yourself. But you can't do this until you've come to these classes or read the books and have certain basic knowledge. Don't come into this class and think the first time you come in here you understand everything. You don't know anything. Nothing at all. Now knock out the nonsense that you have any understanding at all. You're a sleeping blabbermouth, every one of you. You're talking in your sleep. And I tried to get this through your thick heads at the start of the second half. Wake up. Now stop asking questions of me as if you know what you're talking about, because you don't. Don't come in here and blab like you do at the Ladies' Garden Club. This is not the Ladies' Garden Club. All right, questions? Larry.
You talked the first half about a divine interruption when my egotistical I doesn't interrupt with the trembling.
Say that again, please.
You talked this morning about something called divine interruption, higher thought, that would be part of me when I don't let my egotistical I interrupt, associate with
Yes,
my trembling.
yes, that's very good. Fine. That was a very good summary, indeed. Yes,
Could I make a comment on
please,
something that I did to try something different with myself
please.
Last year? I was living in a small town, and a lady came to my door who was from a church. What she wanted to give me or come in and talk to me about was trying to stop women's lib. Now, I'm not saying that I am for or against women's lib when I say this.
Yes.
But I'm saying this is what she was trying to tell me. And since I had a dim realization at that time that people had always told me what to do, I was determined in this situation not to be told. So I told her when she made a comment, and I don't know how I knew to do this, but it seemed that I was doing what you said to do last night, to be consciously aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that I was. But, well, at any rate, I'll get into it. She complimented me on my house and furniture and everything else you could think of to flatter me.
She complimented you on what?
My house, my furniture, and everything else you could think of to flatter me.
Yes.
So she could get
Sure.
me in a receptive mood
Right.
to listen to what she wanted to tell me. So she said, she had this little sheet of paper, and it said, you might be drafted into the Army, or you might have to sleep with men, or you might have to do this and that and all this and that. And at that moment, I said, or she said, you might have to make your own living. I said, I have always made my own living, so that doesn't make any difference to me. So,
All right.
right now, that's all I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that you have to try something different that you think they might get mad at you about. And that's been one of my big fears all my life, is that someone would get mad at me.
Ah, very good. Do any of the rest of you have this fear someone get mad at you?
But I didn't see that until 2 or 3 days ago, the real reason.
Yes. What would you say would be one good lesson that you got out of that?
Think for yourself
Yeah,
for a change.
fair enough. Lorraine?
This week I saw some trembling in myself. It occurred to me that it was what I was afraid of was finding myself out. It really wasn't the other person's opinion that disturbed me as much as it caused me to look inside, and I was really shaking because I didn't want to look at what was there.
Yes, yes. Shake consciously. Write that down. Shake consciously. That means you know you're shaking instead of being identified with it. You're standing apart and watching your shaking instead of just shaking with your eyes closed and completely tied up in your own little prison-like mind, being afraid. And by the way, how many of you are afraid of anything whatever? All right. I will tell you that you're also loaded with hostility. You can't be afraid without being hostile. Loaded with it. Okay, let's get it stronger. I will tell you that if you're afraid, you're also loaded with hatred. Now, that's a very shocking word to most people, but you are loaded with hatred if you're afraid. The two go together always. They'll alternate in there, and when they come out of your psychic system, one time you'll be afraid, the next time you'll be hostile or hateful, and they'll be connected anyway. Wake up, for heaven's sake. For your sake. Stop lying about everything. When you're asleep, you lie about everything. You sit in this class, and when you ask a question or make a statement, you are lying and you don't even know it. Do you know why you're lying? Because you're living in a lying state of being, a very low-level state of being, and that very low level asks the question or makes the comment. I can see from your words and what you say that that's the seller talking. If you can see the seller talking, then that's a different matter. Now you're beginning to observe yourself, to see that you're not the brilliant mind you want us to believe you are, or that you want to convince yourself that you are. Is your hand? Well, I don't see a hand. Now I see a hand.
I see that what you're talking about, namely, not to resist evil. The person that does not resist evil, that is the self, the nature which does not resist evil, is already the self which is above the evil. To resist it means to live in the cellar, in the terms that you have just been talking about. These are synonymous expressions. If you're going to fight it, you're giving it reality because you're fighting it, because you then believe in it, you're assenting to it, you're accepting it, you're saying the trembling is really me and it's so horrible I must resist it. The other person is much brighter and says the trembling was never me, and so I am simply going to endure the illusion, let's say endure the fact that there's something going on here right now which does not belong to me. I'm simply going to examine this very clearly.
Sure.
Now, this is all very valuable because in the past, it seems to me that the phrase drop it, as we have used it, has been somewhat misleading. It implies a duty on my part to drop a negative state, as if perhaps there were a me which could do it. Then when the negative state does not go away, we become confused. A, because we haven't been able to. B, perhaps there's a slight touch of guilt or disappointment there because it has not gone away. In fact, the only way that it's going to go away is when this other self is operating, the one which has no response, no reliance on the negative state.
Okay, fine. The drop it, of course, is a lesson on the level of words. Drop it, a good general phrase which you have to have in order to give yourself the general idea of what you're supposed to do. Then once you have the general kindergarten idea of dropping it, you can go on, as Leland intimated, to see that there's nothing to drop because there's no one to drop anything. But that has to come later. You give a child the broad rules of arithmetic and say, here are the rules. Then you give them the specifics, the higher lessons about the preliminary lessons. Yeah.
The words drop it for about 4 years have just been mental things for me to to wrestle with. About a week ago or such, you said, see it and dissolve it.
Okay.
Now, some reason words go crossways in my trying to understand. They go cockeyed in my head. To see it and dissolve it helps me to understand what the words drop it mean. To drop it means break it and be punished. This is my mind thinking. Break it, a glass, drop it. To see and dissolve is put an aspirin in water and dissolve it. It just comes into my thinking process, easier for me to understand. Does that make any sense?
Well, all right, Larry, but now let's not get too involved in mental pictures. They're all right as little aids and illustrations. Comments, questions? We have a lot of time yet. We should work real hard. Let's start all over, all of us, right now with a determination. That's all right. This is a preliminary lesson with a determination to stay wide awake and listen to everything. Try to see what's happening out there and in here at the same time. I saw a number of hands. Where did I see one? Juanita.
I heard what was said, but I still don't understand. In other words, first, you learn, say, a negative, I feel a negative thought taking me over.
Mm-hmm.
First, you learn how to drop it.
First you see it.
Stop it.
First you see it.
Oh, dropping it doesn't mean stop it then.
It does mean stop it, yes.
So when I feel a negative emotion, when I see it coming on, in other words, just stop it in its tracks before it takes me over.
You stop it by dropping all thought toward it, whatever the situation is. When you stop thought, you stop all the trembling, the whole mess, because it's the thought that causes the problem, because the thought revolves around who you think you are. To stop the thought is to end you, which ends the problem, because you is the problem. Where did I see another hand? Somewhere. Fred, you had your hand up.
Well, you more or less answered it.
Ah.
I was wondering about, I didn't get the beginning of that dropping. It was the negativities you were talking about then.
Yeah. All right, you want to change a little, Jet? All right, write down a sentence of 2 words. Drop me. Same thing. Drop me. Which is the same as dropping thought. Drop thought. Jan.
Okay. I'm new to this class. It's
Sure.
probably going to be one of your stupid questions.
Go.
But are you supposed to not have any egotistical picture of yourself at all? Are you supposed to be just more or less a nothing? I thought you were what your thoughts are.
You are what your thoughts are, and what you are is misery.
Shouldn't you maintain some type of positive image of yourself? And if you find something negative, eliminate that negative and change it to a positive.
Yes.
Becoming nothing.
Isn't that good? Listen to what's going on over there. See, without even knowing it, she fears to be nothing.
Remember that old song you got, accentuate the positive.
Just a minute, please. Everybody quiet. Jan, as you said, you are very new here, and everything that you've said so far is pretty much understood by everyone else here because we've covered it over and over and over and over. For example, indeed you are what your thoughts make you.